So what's the difference between a music producer and a composer? Well, for one, a composer generally just writes the music, whereas a music producer is in charge of the final product, or they're almost like acting as a creative director of the project, whereas the composer is just kind of writing the music. And that's kind of the brunt of what is the main difference between these two terms. I included a nice picture of Beethoven and Rick Rubin right here. I think it's kind of funny just because, this dude, I don't know. They kind of have a similar look on their face. It's kind of funny. But anyway, yeah, these aren't the same thing. Like a music producer, even though they might have the same skills in many cases, I find a music producer is more like it's a particular role that they're filling, rather than a composer, which is fulfilling a different role. So like a composer is, as I said before, they're just writing the music, or they can also act as the conductor if they're working with like a symphony or an orchestra. Or, a composer could just be like a songwriter. It could just be another name for a songwriter. Some of this terminology has just kind of shifted with time, with, the way the culture has changed, and also how the technology has changed. So for instance, like someone wouldn't necessarily call like a bedroom producer a composer, even though technically a bedroom producer is a composer. Like, I mean, if you're composing music, you're a composer, whether you call it a songwriter or a composer. However, I mean, there's different cultural associations with each term. Now, generally, when someone would mention composer, you would think of a certain kind of music. You would think of classical, right? But it doesn't necessarily have to be that way. So if you take a look at this chart that I created right here, I kind of have some of the differences here, what they do, what kind of things they're normally known for. And I find this chart is very helpful. With the first one is the most important, which is that the one is directing the recording and creative process, which is the producer. Then the composer is just writing the music primarily. So, I mean, there's many of examples of this. A producer is, like I said before, Rick Rubin, whereas a composer might be Beethoven. But a more modern example of that would be like John Williams, the guy who made all the music for Star Wars. Or what's the other guy's name? There's another huge one. I forget his name. He did The Simpsons. I forget, but he makes kind of like goofy music. It's I don't even know how to describe it. It's weird, but yeah. So these are two different things, even though they might have some overlapping skills. I think another worthwhile thing to mention too is that a composer, with how we think of it, is usually someone who's going to have a very good understanding of music theory and standard musical notation, including how to write music via all of the different clefs like soprano, alto, tenor, bass, treble, and even the neutral clef, which is more for percussive instruments that don't have a pitch. And also, like a producer wouldn't necessarily need that. Like, you wouldn't necessarily need to be like a music theory or standard notation savant to be a producer. Like, you could just be like a great player, a guitar player who, knows how to work a DAW and knows like how to record and like how to pull the best out of a band or an artist, or, how to create music that is appealable or mainstream, I guess, more mainstream, more accessible by a mainstream audience. But yeah, that's about it. That's about it for this, the differentiation between these two terms. Ultimately, I find that if you read the article, you're going to have a pretty good idea of what they both do. But anyway, make sure you like and subscribe, and then I'll see you in the next one.